Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. We are so excited to have our friend Ashley Pinkeney joining us here once again from Hummingbird Marriage and Family Therapy. She's here from Rochester, New York, and she's working with people as well. An author also as well. Self-professed bookworm, amateur photographer, ethologist, and so much more. But she's also helping people in so many different ways. So Ashley, tell us the website before we begin.
Sure. Hummingbird Marriage and Family Therapy is at Hummingbird M as in marriage, F as in family, T as in therapy.com. Phone number is also 585-443-3124.
Perfect. And gosh, how many years you been doing this for now?
It's coming on 12 years at this point in time.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, we're excited to have you back here as always, and just want to remind everyone of all forms of contact, how we can reach you.
Yep. So phone number again is 585-443-3124. Social media is at Hummingbird MFT. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And then website again, hummingbirdmft.com.
Perfect. And I can't believe this is our 7th episode together here, but it is. We're going to talk today, something about high functioning with mental illness, which a lot of people do. And, I want to ask you first and foremost about the topic and why do you think it's so important for us to address today?
So what I've been noticing is that there's just an increase, like with the increased pressures that people have just to make ends meet. There's also people who are just struggling with mental health concerns, but masking it or putting aside their own care. And I remember first hearing about high functioning depression specifically in 2022. And this was a topic of a clinical consultation meeting I was having with some other therapists shortly after Miss USA 2019, Chelsea Christ had died by suicide. And we were talking about how tragic this situation was with her. And I remember reading some articles, and her mother was quoted as saying that, she was dealing with high functioning depression that she hid from everybody until shortly before her death. And I was like, wow, that has to just be just tragic for her family to go through. And I was like, I've never really heard of, high functioning depression. Like, what is that? And I started doing a deep dive and looking down the rabbit hole of like what that is. And like all these things were coming up about high functioning people with mental illness. So as I started to do more research about it, I realized there's a lot of clients who I work with who fit the description of people who are high functioning, meaning they may be high achievers, they're perfectionists, people pleasers. Like to the average eye, they're looking like they got everything going on and everything is fine, but then they're struggling inside. And there's the depression, they're meeting the clinical criteria for some of these mental health concerns, but they're just not getting the help and the support they need. And I'm like, wow, like this is something is an increased struggle. And I think we should just talk about it a little bit of what it looks like and not normalize it when people are saying, this is who I am, or I've always been like this, or, I don't know what to do, so I just have to suffer in silence. And it's like, you actually don't have to. So, there's support out there for people who need that.
And I'm sorry, just the Miss USA, Chelsea, who passed, was she the one in New York City?
Yes, she was in New York City. Yes.
Okay, I remember that story. I think she fatally lunged to her death, right, from her building.
Yes.
Or you look at someone like that. Wow, they have it all. They're amazing. They're beautiful. Their life, and then you just never know, and you never know if people are silently suffering. And so it's also important to look for some warning signs, which I know we're going to talk about today for those that may be hiding it. But let's break it down specifically. What is high functioning mental illness?
So it's not an official diagnosis within the DSM-5, which, us healthcare providers use. However, it's more of like a colloquial term used by those who are living with mental illness that most people are just not detecting it. So, like I was saying earlier, people may meet the criteria for clinical depression or generalized anxiety disorder or, other things, but day to day, they're doing all the things necessary. They're holding down a job. They may be going to school. They're dressing well. They're not having hygiene issues. They have a family. They have some good relationships, but internally they're going through these mental gymnastics to hide any visible distress. And the holding of all of that makes them exhausted, overwhelmed, struggling in silence. And, oftentimes I'm seeing people coming to my office and they're saying, like nothing's really wrong with me. Like, there's nothing going on in my life, but something feels off. Something is just like I'm not satisfied, or like I'm just noticing I'm kind of like antsy or fearful all the time, or I'm not having great relationships, but other things are okay, or I'm doing great at work, but like other things are struggling, like something's just like I'm not myself. And oftentimes, like when I'm hearing that, I'm like, okay, so something's going on. There's the high functioning part, but then, here's some their mental health concerns that are coming up too.
And what would you say, what can make it difficult for people to really seek out the help that they need?
Mhm. I think that there's this feeling of I'm not like sick enough. Like I'm not bad enough. It's not really that bad. It's not
Yeah,
interrupting my life as intensely as, you would think it would be if somebody who's depressed, or even putting like timestamps on stuff, saying like, once this project is done at work, or like once my workload eases up, or, once this event occurs, then, I'll be fine. It's just the stress, like, but then people don't feel better after that, and they'll
no,
downplay the stress and they'll downplay the burdens that they're carrying. And there's just there also can be this tremendous amount of shame that's occurring for people internally about how they're feeling, and feeling like they don't have a reason to feel that way, and it's just like
true.
that internal turmoil is going on too.
Got it. And would you say shame really impacts that too, right? We're embarrassed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
I'm embarrassed to ask for help. Uh, 2 years now. I I waited. I had LED lights in a box at my house, and I needed help stringing them up on this high thing. And I live alone, so I asked my sister or husband, and I felt bad asking. And then you know what? You feel I'm like they're gonna think I'm annoying. I did it last night with my two little kids finally, and I got on a ladder. I did it, but I'm just anything in life. Sometimes you feel like, oh, they're going to think less of me if I ask for help, and it's
Exactly.
not an important enough reason to help me to do
Mhm.
our house. But with anything in general, some of us feel so, people would judge us or feel selfish because we're asking for help.
Mhm.
It's a hard thing.
Right. It is, especially when people are just like, oh, it's not big enough deal
Hmm.
that I need to ask for help, or like I should be able to do this.
Yeah.
Like I said, stringing up lights, like I've same thing. I've done stuff around my house where I'm like, I need help. I was like, no, maybe if I get a ladder and I, put this up this way or whatever. I'm like, no, you actually need help, because if you fall or if you hurt yourself or something, that's not going to help anybody. So, it's getting over the shame, and like shame in itself is just, the definition, if people don't know it, it's like the painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by consciousness of wrongdoing or foolish behavior. And I think the definition says it all right there. There's elements of humiliation, distress, feeling foolish, like all of
Yeah.
these things that are these internal experiences that are just difficult to confront, or difficult to just tolerate or speak to other people about.
Yeah, it is. All right. So, what advice do you want to share with us today about those going through this? I mean, what's the next step? You have to, right? Ask for the
Yeah,
help, and
right.
you have to. And could you share a little more details about high functioning mental illness, and, what are the forms of it?
Yeah. So, with the forms of it, like we could look at high functioning depression, which is also like from a DSM point of view, counted as like dysthymia, which is chronic depression. So people who can maintain a semblance of normalcy in their lives, but they're grappling with like persistent low mood, feeling of hopelessness, or just lack of enjoyment in their life. So you have that one. You also have high functioning anxiety, which is just this internal turmoil of worry, fear, or nervousness that's masked by success or achievement. And despite feeling like intense anxiety, like people can exhibit these traits of perfectionism, punctuality, high degree of organization. And I find this one just very interesting personally, because it's something that, like, as an employer, looks like the model employee, or like the ideal employee. Like you have somebody who is detail oriented, who's
Yeah.
punctual, who's organized, and, they show up, when they need to. They may overextend themselves in the work environment to get things done. And then a lot of work environments will reward those behaviors. So people are getting, they might get like a bonus or like a plaque, or like just some kind of recognition for all of these things. And it makes them climb up the corporate ladder. However, the internal experience that they're going on with, like, like
Hmm.
it's like, well, if you're getting incentivized to continue with these behaviors, you're going to continue to do it.
Yeah.
But the motivation is from this place of like anxiety, but not a place of like also like determination in your own life, or determination about what you want to do in your career. It's like the fear of failure comes in, where you don't want to do something and feel like, okay, I don't want to like embarrass myself or look bad or anything like that.
Yeah. It's so true.
Right. And the last one is like high functioning autism, which is now a part of the autism spectrum disorders. So it's like a neurodevelopmental
Developmental.
disorder that affects social interactions and communication. So people with high functioning autism, they may have average or above average intelligence. They may excel in areas of their life where they have, a keen interest on things, and they might struggle with social cues or have preferred structures or routines. And those signs could be really subtle and lead to like later diagnosis or misinterpretation of who they are as a person, like in their lives.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you mentioned that, by the way, signs and
Mm-hmm.
symptoms of this, because some people may not know what to expect. And how do you, by the way, the high functioning autism, I keep hearing that term more and more, besides the regular autism. Do you know the difference, what high functioning compared to regular means? If you,
I think that because autism is on a spectrum that, I think depending on like what do you look as high functioning, because in certain situations, like I was saying, some
meaning,
people may have like be excelling in certain things where they have interest or they have
got it.
talent in those things. So it's like, kind of even similar to with the high functioning anxiety, like, it might make a model employee who's like detail oriented and like just perfectionistic in a lot of different things, and they're achieving stuff, but like the internal motivation and the way that they're operating is causing this distress that we don't see. And it's masking behaviors where people are just looking like they're doing okay, but they're actually not. So it comes up in different ways, and I think it's hard to see because so many subtleties that come up with that.
Now, could you give us some examples of the specific forms of it? Do you mind?
Sure. So like if we're looking at other like signs and symptoms, so what we're looking at, so I always tell people pay attention to how your body is feeling. Listen to the whispers before it becomes a scream. So,
True.
as we spoke about before, there is an overlap in the manifestations of symptoms that are physical with like your quality of mental health. We had talked about this in a previous podcast. And, being sluggish all the time is not normal. Like noticing if there's like this increased irritability or
Okay.
angry outbursts that people have, that's not a normal thing. The sleep disturbances, reduced appetite or increased appetite, restlessness, these overwhelming fears or worries that you have on a regular basis. Like when those things are so disproportionate, like that's telling you like a warning sign of like, hey, something's going on. And a lot of times people are like, well, it's not that loud, it's not that big of a deal, or like, I only couldn't sleep a couple of nights this week, but I'm doing better now. But all those kind of disturbances are saying like something's going on here.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned internally we might be wrestling with some distressing thoughts, right? And one of them in particular is like an OCD type of perfectionist behavior, right?
Yes.
And also difficulty with social environments.
Yes. So a lot of times people can have issues with like reading cues from other people, or even just maintaining social relationships, like, feeling distressed with being able to do that, of, the feeling of, hey, I want to go out, I want to spend some time with my friends, but just that lack of energy of like, I can't move, I can't, get out of the bed kind of feeling, or maybe not even get out of the bed, but sometimes like I can't even get off the couch right now. It's like, I know I got someplace to go or something to do. And, you might be canceling things last minute or hoping things get canceled. I could think of, people who can go to, exactly. And then you also have people who go to different events and stuff, and they're just anxious the whole time, or they're irritable. And it's not like the social anxiety type of thing, but it's just like this exhaustion. And I always talk with my clients about bandwidth, of like, how much bandwidth do you have to be putting into all of these different things that you're doing? And some people are running on fumes, like, or they're running really close to empty when they're having all this stuff to do, but they're still pushing themselves to do stuff. And it's taking a toll on their mental health and their physical health because their body's wearing down. A lot of people get colds or, all those kind of illnesses, particularly in the winter in New York, like, your body's run down like that, and your immune system is getting run down because of the stress you're putting on yourself. That's a sign that maybe we got to slow down a little bit.
And what about reduction of appetite, not able to sleep, overwhelming fears and just worry, right?
Exactly. So many of those things. And, like some of those things can be really subtle things where it's like, I'm a little stressed, like, I got to work through this project and maybe I missed lunch or something. And you don't realize, okay, maybe you missed lunch and you missed dinner, or, you were running out
Maybe.
the door and you had like,
Yeah.
something to drink and then you didn't have anything else, or running on coffee all day, which
Happens a lot. Hold on, guilty. I just moved mine aside. But yeah, I get it.
yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I have mine sitting over there too, but running on fumes like that, where it's just like I need something to get me through the day just so I can get all this stuff done. And that, mentality of like, here's the next thing. Like when this happens, I'll get a break. It's just something that people go through and don't realize how much they normalize it until you actually get a break. And you're like, oh, I didn't realize that I was like running myself
No, I
into the
didn't
ground.
know. Exactly. Well,
Mhm.
could it also be related to certain phases of life?
Yeah. And I think that, like we talked about with life transitions, a couple of podcasts ago, with life transitions, there's a shift in this period of stability and predictability when you're going through this period of change. And oftentimes, like the signs and symptoms that can happen when you have this high functioning with like mental health concerns can be overlooked, or it's brushed off because you're going through a stressful period, or that there's this massive change that's happening, but the proportion that you have of distress in this
Is.
situation related to whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
in this transition is just disproportionate. But you still have to get things done. So you could see people, like I said, running on fumes and like, okay, it'll be fine. But once let's say we move or something like that, like
Yeah,
once that's done, you're still feeling
it's
all this
not.
distress and stuff.
My gosh.
Mhm.
All right. So how are we going to make this better?
So I think that, there's a lot of ways that we can make this better. So I'm going to just name the negative ways that people can do this because I think it has to be said, but we're going to talk about the positive things like therapy too. So, sometimes people utilize means such as, disordered eating behaviors, which could be restriction, binging, purging. People can also have an increase in alcohol usage or turning to drugs to alleviate symptoms, or just trying to get a break from their distress and their feelings. So if you're somebody who is noticing like a loved one or somebody who you care for, that they're having
Yeah.
maybe a couple too many glasses of wine with dinner, and you're like, that's a little
Mm,
up, or they're
yeah.
disordered eating behaviors, or using substances that are not normal that they would use, or those sort of things, like that might give you a little bit of a sign of like, something's going on with them. And being able to check in with them and just be like, hey, I'm noticing this stuff going
Yep.
on, like, is everything okay? And hopefully they would be honest or be able to give a little bit of information about what's going on with them. But also, like we were saying earlier, that shame piece may come in where people don't want to talk about it. But if you're not able to talk to somebody, or if you're noticing for yourself that this might be going on, therapy can be helpful. I always think therapy can be helpful, but I'm biased because I'm a therapist, obviously.
Yeah.
But therapy is one of those things where you can come in and talk to a clinician about challenging like these negative thought patterns and developing coping skills that are healthier for you, and exploring the roots of criticism or these behaviors, or like where this mindset comes from, that you have to like operate in this way and not like care for yourself, or how do you like notice how to put boundaries up for yourself when you notice yourself pushing yourself. How does social expectations play a role into this experience? Like, what are these different things that we get told about who we're supposed to be, or we're supposed to do? Like one population of people I particularly see this a lot with are moms, especially new moms. A lot of new moms, when they come in, they're just like, I gotta, take care of my child, and I gotta go back to work in 6 weeks. I gotta make sure everything is right. And like all this pressure that they can have around themselves about who they're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be after this major life transition, and taking care of a tiny little human too. There's a lot of like people who can be high functioning with, depression, or particularly for women, like postpartum depression, that can get
Yeah.
masked or not even noticed by other people.
Yeah.
And then I also think that therapy can help you with like building your own social support network, whatever that needs to look like. And then learning about creating realistic goals and smart goals for yourself, and setting reasonable expectations for yourself about what you can do or can't do, or even what you don't want to do. Like one of the things
Mm-hmm.
I've always telling myself is like, I want to do more things I want to do and less things that I don't want to do. And again, having boundaries with yourself of like, you know what, maybe I don't need to take this on. Maybe this is not okay. Maybe this is not my responsibility, and just prioritizing that. And, having the prioritizing with the self-care of taking breaks, and, just getting away from things and having good people around you and those sort of things.
Got it. And by the way, we got to remind everyone how we can reach you. By the way, you've been on a roll. We haven't even stopped. Tell us how we can contact you again.
Of course. So the website is hummingbirdmft.com. Social media is at hummingbirdmft. And then phone number is 585-443-3124. And I am located in Rochester, New York. So if you want to see me virtually in the state of New York, I am available. Or if you want to see me in person and you're here in the Rochester area, you can come on into my office here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, let's continue. Still, we're not done. We still have, oh my gosh, we have 6 minutes left in the show. 5 minutes. Wait, we're down to 5. What else do we need to cover? Sorry.
Well, I mean, I think that, the ability to support people is important, and being able to, like, like I was saying, like noticing when people are struggling and like how to care for your loved ones, or how to like ask those questions along the way. Because I think, oftentimes people don't want to be nosy, or they feel like, okay, I'm being nosy. Like I notice something is off, but like, is that my place to ask, like, if you're noticing some more like anxiety or depression, or just like people being triggered, or just responding to stuff. Like sometimes people just don't want to ask those questions, or they feel like, I can't do anything to help somebody.
I agree. It's always so hard. Could you share an example of someone that you've worked with, without saying their name, but someone that you've worked with this issue, and how it's helped, your coaching has helped them?
Yeah, so I notice I have a couple of like younger women, like in their 20s, like right out of college, out of graduate school, like in those kind of areas where they're going to these life transitions, where they're going from used to being in school and having that kind of structure in their life, and then going full-fledged into adulthood. And I think that that's such a transition that people can have, that can be so difficult for people to go through. It's like, I tell people, they're like, well, I don't know how to like manage my life right now. And I'm like, well, if you think about it, if you were in school for the majority of your life, you're used to having a schedule set for you. Like, you have a school schedule. You have, when you go to college, same thing, you have a school schedule, or like, you work around a work schedule. It's like, once you get out of that kind of academic environment, you have full freedom to your schedule, basically, like when you're working or not working. And like, sometimes people don't know how to manage that kind of freedom. And this can be kind of scary. And it's like, oh, like I have to set all this stuff up for myself. Like I have to set, when I'm going to work, when I'm grocery shopping, when I'm making doctor's appointments, all those increased responsibilities can be really scary. And then, we talk about, the lack of social support too. Cause, when you're in school, you are around most of your friends all the time. Like people are in classes, or you're studying and that sort of thing. And there's such amount of isolation that I'm noticing for a lot of my people who I work with in their young 20s, where they're like, I'm not seeing my friends as much anymore. We're not going out, and, we're not, people moved across the country or across the state or something. And there could be such an increase of isolation, which can cause some more depressive symptoms. But like we were saying before, people are still doing all the stuff they got to do, but massive changes and feeling more depressed or more anxious. And depending on what type of job that you have, there might be a huge amount of pressure to, make it, and to prove yourself as an employee, and prove yourself that you deserve this job. And all this anxiety, how you're working, contributes to, struggles with like sleeping, or putting in all this extra work, and you're there, hours after work, and all these different things. And it's just a lot, particularly in that age. Like I can just think of my own like young to mid 20s, and I'm just like, I mean, you couldn't pay me enough to go back through that,
Wow. Yeah, it's so true. And to function each and every day, I just want to point out, I say this whole time, but it's one thing that since the past years of the pandemic, it really made me want to live a better life. And I hope people are inspired, as bad as it was, to make us live a better life. And we all are entitled to live our best life, and to feel happiness and feel joy, to get through things. But not everybody has the tools to do it by themselves. Hence, someone like you come in, and it's good. We gotta learn to accept help sometimes. You really can't do it alone. Have you ever felt like that before yourself as well?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think that, with being a therapist and all the work that I do, it's like I had to go seek out my own therapist too. And yes, therapists have therapists. Like it's a whole
I was
thing
going to say, is it a
because
therapist or therapist? Yes.
yeah, the therapist has a therapist who has a therapist. Like it's just, throughout the whole line of things. And it's just because there is a lot of pressure that goes on here and like just being like, hey, I do need some extra support because I know for me, I'm hearing a lot of like distress, a lot of trauma, a lot of pain. And that's a lot to hold on to, like, even if it's not mine, but like, having that space where I'm like creating safety for other people and making sure that they're okay to talk about their stuff. Like, all of the stuff can also stick to me. And I'm like, ooh, like now I'm feeling off. So like, let me make sure that I'm getting my own support as well of, having my own therapist who I check in with and, having good self-care and good people around me and like knowing those boundaries and stuff. And I think that as I've gotten further along in my career, I've learned what that needs to look like for me and not having like the pressure of like, okay, I gotta make it as a therapist. I gotta do all these different things and, running myself into the ground like I did in my 20s. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I want to make sure I'm doing the things that I want to do and like less of the things that I don't want to do so that I can have the best quality life for myself. Yeah, like nobody's going to take care of me the way that I take care of me.
It's so true. You have to. And in closing today, how did you want to leave off for our listeners?
Just for people to take care of themselves, like notice these things, that may be going on for you, of that you may be high functioning and you're doing great and you're killing it at life, but also if you're feeling all this internal distress that's going on, like if it's just feeling like it's not sustainable. And I think that's the biggest thing of like, working at certain paces is just not sustainable. Make sure you get help and support around that, that you take breaks, find a therapist if you need one. Like, even if it's just a couple of sessions, like, people don't have to be in therapy for years, but sometimes we just go through stuff and it's like, I just need an outside view. I need somebody who's non-biased to talk through some stuff just to kind of clear my head and clear the air around me. And that's perfectly fine too. Therapy does not have to be forever.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for being here again, and remind us how we can reach out to you, please.
Yes. So website again is hummingbirdmft.com. So Hummingbird, M as in marriage, F as in family, T
thank you
as in therapy. And at Hummingbird MFT on Facebook and Instagram. And you can give me a phone call at 585-443-3124 if you want to set up a free 15-minute consultation appointment to see if I'd be a good fit as a therapist for you.
Great. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the next time we connect. You have a fantastic day, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And to all of our listeners, stay tuned. More of the show is coming right up.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.